Imagine this. You get a text that says, "Can you give me a ring?" And your first thought is calm and curious, not, "Oh God, what have I done wrong?" Your boss shares feedback and you treat it as information instead of evidence that everybody hates your work and you're about to be frog marched out the building. And when you're missing details, your mind doesn't sprint towards disaster planning. You leave space until you actually know what's going on. You become the kind of person who works with facts instead of the stories that your brain writes in the gaps. And you stop filling in the blanks like you're trying to win a game of Connect 4. That shift starts when you learn to ask 3 simple questions before your thoughts run away with the story. So let me walk you through them. And by the end of this video, you'll have a simple framework that you can use to save yourself a lot of stress, second guessing, and that familiar knot in your stomach. But before you do, if you're new here, welcome to the coaching sessions. I'm David, and this is a space where we have honest conversations about what it means to stop playing a supporting role in your own life. As a mindset coach, my work is all about helping gay men move from that second best feeling to a place of freedom and confidence. And if that sounds like a conversation that you want to be part of, I invite you to subscribe and hit the like button because it's the simplest way to stay connected and make sure that you don't miss what's coming next. Now, I've sent messages in the past that have said, "I've got some good news, can you give me a ring?" Clear enough, right? Good news should be simple. But the reply that I've had more than once, "Oh my God, I was so worried." Huh? Confused. The brain had deleted the good news completely, and it took the plain message, stripped out the reassurance, and upgraded to a full-blown crisis with dramatic lighting and a soundtrack included, because all they saw was, "We need to talk." And this is what happens when the brain doesn't have all the facts. It fills in the blanks, but it rarely gets filled with "everything's probably fine." It jumps to worst case scenarios, catastrophe, and drama. And here's what I've seen again and again as a coach, that when you don't have all of the facts, your brain will often plug the gaps with fear, doubt, worst case outcomes. And it's not trying to punish you, even though it can feel that way. It's trying to prepare you, to protect you, to make sure that you're not blindsided if the worst does happen. If you can mentally rehearse the outcome, your brain believes that you can move through the impact and the pain faster. The challenge is this: you end up living through stress, anxiety, and tension for things that haven't happened yet and may never happen at all. So I want to give you this simple framework, and it's what I use with my clients inside of my online coaching space, the Freedom Community. It's what we use when they're spiraling over incomplete information. 3 questions that give your brain some structure so it doesn't have to invent a full disaster film every time something is unclear. And the first question is going to focus on facts and evidence, and it's what makes this true. Or more directly, you can ask yourself, is this factually correct or am I assuming? Let me give you an example. I was working with a client inside of my community who said to me, "I can't do that task because my boss hates me and he always complains about my work." So I asked them, I said, "Well, always is a bold word. Is it every single time, or have there just been a few occasions where he's given you feedback?" Now, for clarity, this isn't about catching somebody out or making them feel silly. It's about helping their brain tell the difference between always and sometimes. Now, just pause on that always word for a second. That, my friend, is a generalization. And generalizations are where your brain starts bending reality around old thoughts, assumptions, and patterns and things that have happened in the past. So we got specific and I said, right, okay, well, what are the facts? And it turned out it wasn't every task. It was just a couple of projects that needed revisions. Important ones, yes. Work that mattered, yes, but still it was just a handful of situations, not every single piece of work every single day. And when you start paying attention to the facts, the story will change. So ask yourself, what makes this true? What's the evidence? Is this fact, or have I taken a few moments to turn it into a sweeping story? And you're not denying your feelings, you're just checking whether your feeling is based on what happened or what your mind has invented in the gaps. The next question is going to focus on relevance and impact. So once you've got the facts, the next question you're going to ask yourself is, why does this matter right now? Or another version of that could be, what's the real impact here? Now, back to my client for a second. We'd established the facts. We knew it wasn't constant criticism. It was just a couple of tasks where revisions were needed. So we looked at what mattered in the moment. Was the important thing about this the specific task that needed updating right now, or was it the story that they were carrying about their boss hating them and their work being rubbish? Because here's what tends to happen. If you carry around a belief that your boss hates you and everything that you do, that belief colours every interaction, every email, meeting, every piece of feedback. And you start reading neutral comments as attacks, and you start second-guessing every decision. And you brace for impact before anything has even happened. But if the facts tell a different story, a few clear pieces of feedback on specific work, then the global belief loses its weight and it becomes background noise. So you can ask yourself, is this important right now, or am I giving it more weight than it deserves? Or what changes for me when I focus on the facts instead of the story that I've built around them? And this is where you move from everything is dangerous to this is the one piece that needs my attention today. The next question is going to focus on action and next steps. So once you've checked the facts and the relevance, the third question is, what's the best thing to do about it? Or another version is, what's the next logical step that helps me move forward? For my client, the action actually had two parts. First, they began to notice when their thoughts started to stretch a situation out of proportion. They treated it as a pattern, not as a personal failing, so not something to give themselves a hard time over. They were like, right, I'm doing that always, never a thing again, that's okay, but let's bring it back to what actually happened this time. And second, they decided to speak to their boss. Not from a place of, oh God, he hates me, what am I going to say? But from a place of wanting clarity. I want to understand how you see my work. Where am I doing well, or where do you want to see any changes going forward? In other words, they gathered the information instead of staying stuck in guessing mode. Because when you don't have all the facts, you do always have this choice. You can let your brain run its own private drama, or you can pause, take a step back and look at what the real information is to bring you real progress. So ask yourself, what's the next step that moves this forward? How can I get more clarity instead of feeding that story in my head? Now, the important thing to remember here is that your brain's top job is to keep you safe. And to do that, it takes shortcuts. It will delete details. It has to. There's too much information floating around, and it turns a few moments into always or never. And it fills in missing pieces with endings that you already fear. And if you never question these shortcuts, you end up living as if those invented stories are facts. And my client did this on autopilot for years until we started working together inside of my coaching space, because they didn't realize that simple questions like this could change the whole experience. And once they began asking, what makes this true? Why does it matter? What's the best thing to do about it? The story shifted. It was still true that a couple of tasks needed work, but it was not true that their boss hated them or that everything they did was a problem. And as they began to separate facts from fear, they became more objective about their work, and they were able to hear feedback without turning it into a personal attack. And oh my gosh, the sense of relief was palpable. And they had room to breathe again and feel more human. Now, here's what starts to change when you use these three questions. That familiar spiral eases up. You put distance between a message, a look, a comment, and the story that your mind wants to bolt onto the end of it. You feel steadier because you're working with what you know, not everything that you can imagine. You become the kind of person who checks the story instead of believing every thought, and you ask for clarity instead of assuming the worst. You carry yourself like somebody who can handle information even when it's a little bit uncomfortable. And the tangible shift is you make cleaner decisions, you have clearer conversations, and you stop pouring energy into outcomes that only exist in your mind, and you put that energy into what you can influence right now. And life feels less chaotic and a bit more grounded and peaceful, and you feel more in charge of your inner world, even when the outer world is a little bit unclear. So here's something that you can try this week. The next time that you get a text that makes your stomach flip, or a vague email from your boss, or a half-finished sentence from somebody important, pause. Before the story takes over, ask, what makes this true? Why does it matter right now? And what's the best thing to do about it? And see how different it feels to respond from those answers instead of letting your brain write the script by itself. And if you're ready to stop living at the mercy of worst case scenarios and want support as you practice this in real life, you'll find a link below to explore working with me and joining my coaching space, the Freedom Community. But until then, you might ask yourself, where in my life do I want to start dealing with facts instead of fear? And I shall see you in the next session. Be well.